work with innovators, governments, and donors to support digital health programs by supporting adaptable, interoperable tools that are designed to work together seamlessly. One of the ways we support tools is by doing sessions like this to support interoperability between tools. So before we get started, this is a pretty informal session. We have a small crowd. I suggest we just mute yourself until you have a question, and otherwise we'll just let Jose kind of take it from here. Quick introduction on Jose. You've seen him do actually most of our fireside, or sorry, most of our FHIR webinars. He is a data management standards and interoperability consultant who's worked for over 20 years in the digital healthcare sector. He's been involved in integration projects such as development of integration and data analytics systems in Europe and Latin America, integrations in a large hospital group in Paris, and contribute to the National Integration Framework in Belgium. He is the co-chair of the IHE Pharmacy, as well as an avid supporter and contributor to FHIR. Jose, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Veranda.
Yeah.
Indeed, so this is a pretty informal session or informal chat where we should be able to look at current challenges and cool ideas, things that are on people's minds, so that we can have an open discussion on how do we handle this big new beast that is FHIR, and how do we make it work in our favor. So after the introduction, thank you very much, Brenda, again. I don't know if we should ask the other folks if they have any things that they want to bring forward as topics for discussion, or if not, we can try to extract that by having people mention a bit of what they are doing and see if that brings us cool ideas, challenges, and things to discuss. Oh, we have a few more people joining. That's good. While people are joining, does that sound okay? Is it okay if I ask, for example, Carl, if you have anything that you want to bring to the table? You're in the house, and then Shamika, if there's any challenge that you want to address, and then we can see who else has things to bring, and that can lead us to cool ideas or some other discussions. Does that make sense?
Hi, folks. Thank you for this opportunity. Actually, I'm Dr. Charmika from Sri Lanka. Actually, I'm specializing in health informatics. So in Sri Lankan setup, I mean, we have just started trying to make like a blueprint of how to implement the FHIR HL7. But one of the main challenges is the knowledge, because we cannot find much certified FHIR implementers in Sri Lanka. So I think in these parts of the world, I think mostly knowledge gap is one of the crucial challenges at the moment. So yeah, I would like to address that challenge. Thank you so much.
We can, definitely. Anyone else? A quick intro, what they are doing, what they are facing, so that we can pick more ideas from there. We have Mamadou on the line, but I don't think he has audio. We have Jonathan, so I don't know if you want to mention, to say a few words about what you're doing, what you are interested in.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Hey, everybody. Yeah, well, I thought I haven't been to one of these, so I was just curious, how you're running these sessions and listen in. But if there is time for an in the weeds discussion about designations in FHIR, I would be happy to get into the weeds on that one. We are working on with the Open Concept Lab and importing kind of advanced compositions for value sets, and so like dynamic generation and expansions, we're moving towards supporting that. The only area that we at least right now, for what we're going to be implementing soon, that we have questions on still is designations and kind of where's the right place to start, what's the minimum spec that we want to support, and just kind of having a better understanding of how that's handled in FHIR. So again, it's pretty in the weeds, but would be interesting to talk through if there's some time for it.
I would be interested in discussing that indeed. Do we have any more topics? I think Mamadou, I presume you can now hear us. Do you have any concerns, any ideas, any preferences for what we should be discussing, how we should steer, or what are your pain points, or what are your interests, or what we should discuss? This is an open discussion. We don't have, there is no single center of truth and knowledge about FHIR, but there's a bit more experienced people, and there's a broad community, and my mission is also to allow you to be part of that community, so that everyone can reach out to whoever they need, not having these sessions or any other sessions as the sole point of getting knowledge. So Mamadou, with that, do you want to share any concerns, wishes, or ideas that you have that you would like to handle or would like to discuss around FHIR? Okay, well, Mamadou is not yet with his audio on. Two interesting topics, and I think so. I'm definitely interested in both of them. So Jonathan,
Jose, hi.
yeah,
Sorry.
Hi.
Hey, again. Yeah. The topic that I want to discuss is about the real implementation of FHIR. I know you had organized another webinars on that maybe, but I lost. I did not get a chance to participate, to attend, but I don't know if you have a document or is planning something like that. I just want to see a real implementation of FHIR, maybe. Thanks.
Very good.
Over to you.
Very good. Thank you. I'm trying to so looking at this, and we have those three interesting topics. Is it okay? Tell me if it's not okay, but I would prefer just to sequence them like this. I would handle the question from Shamika first, which is about knowledge about FHIR and how do we get that in shape. That's how I understand. So we can exchange some thoughts there. Then we can move on to the actual real implementation of that, because that also follows our sequence. So we say much of the knowledge has to be there, otherwise you don't get to implement anything, which makes sense. Then we go a bit into the implementation details, where we have another kind of discussion. And Jonathan, if that's okay, then we address the other part about designations after that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you. So I'll just go in. For those of you who don't know me, I tend to talk a lot because it's me. So feel free to interrupt me, and feel free to say, you're going too far, that's a cool idea, but come down to earth. So feel free to interrupt at any moment with questions, or if what I'm saying is just for my own amusement, and if it's not relevant to you. With that disclaimer, let's go. So Shamika, you have the interesting challenge of how do we get started with FHIR. I don't know if you are familiar with our other sessions that we had. So if you have seen them, Mamadou, the same question is for you. We have these sessions, we recorded them, where we started saying basically the basics of FHIR. So what is FHIR? What does it consist of? How is it born? How does it intend to address some of the problems that we have? Then we went to a second session, which is FHIR profiling. So how do we make FHIR in our flavor? So how do we customize the whole thing a bit for us? Then we had another session which was on terminologies. This was 2 weeks ago, where we explored the specifics of terminology, which is a very important part of FHIR. And the next session is in 2 weeks from now, almost 2 weeks from now. We will be discussing the actual implementation of FHIR. So we'll be discussing how do we take all that knowledge and create our own implementation specification. So this being in the roadmap, and that's also how why I would like to take these three topics in this sequence. They will be intertwined, but I think we can start with that. So about knowledge of FHIR. Indeed, there's not yet enough people to meet the demand of FHIR. There is a very broad community of FHIR, let's say, enthusiasts and professionals and practitioners that is very, very active. We can leave the links somewhere, but I will just open them. So we have a thing called chat.fhir.org. If you're not familiar with it, my first recommendation is please get familiar with it. You should really be part of that of those discussions. So chat.fhir.org is a very open and very real-time communication method for everyone that wants to ask, from things like, hey, I'm new to FHIR, I don't know where to start, or I have a very detailed question, or even the standard, I don't agree that the standard way to represent this should be that way, or I would like to make a change to the FHIR resources. So it covers everything from infrastructure, to deployment, to national implementations. It covers everything, and it's a wealth of information that I would really recommend that you get active on. Second thing is reading the specs, but reading the specs is not something that you do for fun. It's a lot of material, and so I think the best thing to do is really to follow some of the courses. So we gave a quick intro, as I said, these quick intros to FHIR, and we will continue that. So every time that we discuss a new topic, we kind of do a recap of what we have discussed before. But there are several institutions that provide FHIR training. We have our own, just welcoming the FHIR basics. HL7 does provide FHIR courses, and those are quite accessible in terms of who can participate. I mean, in terms of level of knowledge that there is, I don't know, I don't remember the pricing structure, but that's also a normal pricing. Whatever normal pricing means in your location. So that we have those official courses, and they really help you get more proficient with the details and with nice to knows and things that you should never forget, or things that you usually forget, but then you have in a session, in a formal training session, it's always good to say to remind of those things and to follow a training structure. So it's one recommendation that we can do if you have chance. The other recommendation is to look at events like FHIR Dev Days and FHIR Connectathons. So FHIR Dev Days is really advanced. Well, there is from basic to advanced community of people. Some people go there to say, how are we doing this in this country? Or how are we setting up our terminology services? Or how are we doing this or that part in FHIR? So it's really oriented to actual improvements or actual implementations. And there's also, of course, more advanced discussion, like how do you use, for example, Jonathan, the thing that you mentioned, how would you use designations in FHIR? Well, that's an interesting thing, and maybe that would be, if FHIR has any strong recommendation there, then maybe that's something to discuss also in Dev Days. So Dev Days are kind of a lot of breakout sessions, a lot of community sessions. The Connectathon is a testing where people go and say, I don't have a test server, but I would like still to look at the specification by making my JSONs by hand, or by putting my use cases against what the specification is. So we have those events. Overall, the recommendation is get involved. If you start getting involved, and the best way to do that is with a chat.fhir.org, you'll find some like-minded people, some people that are at the same step of adoption, or people that have already walked those steps, and you will surely find some communities that are interested in exchanging some ideas. Some concrete, some more concrete stuff about implementing it. Normally, when we start doing FHIR stuff, there's usually, I mean, from my experience, there is always a kind of a hype, like, hey, we'll do everything on FHIR. In my experience, it's better not to jump and say, let's forget the rest of the world, let's just do FHIR, everything on FHIR. Although I like the idea, I tend to put standardization first or before FHIR, meaning that if you have an existing standard that works, or if you have an existing infrastructure that is somehow not compatible with FHIR, that should also be put in the equation. It's not easy to say, we are going to create the perfect interoperable system, but it won't work because the government servers are not ready for this, and because most of the industry is still using something else. So that's really does not add any value. So I would keep always attention to those implementation constraints and those architectural constraints. In terms of how do you gain knowledge, set up a pilot project. So it tends to work from my experience. Again, don't start with a big bang. Start with a couple of pilot projects, and for those you can say, I need my guys to be having I need 3 of my guys to have a FHIR training, or I need us to discuss more with the community, because by the time we can do this, we need to have some more proficiency in FHIR. And if you try to embark on a journey that is too long and you don't see the way out of this, so if you cannot have measurable or attainable timelines, and then everything starts being a bit fuzzy. You know, we want to go FHIR. You know, we want to transform the whole Sri Lanka country in FHIR in 2 years. Maybe that's possible, but maybe that's not possible. And there is no way to know that until people really know what they are about to face. So starting with a small pilot, with a small scope, something that allows us to say, okay, I don't know everything, I don't know everything that we need to do, but I know that we'll at least have our first implementation guide. We need to do our first profiling. We need to do our first testing event. If you do, and again, this is my opinion from an agile practice perspective, if you start these things like this, if you have a small scope, but you can walk that path once, then it becomes much easier for you to say, I've done that for, I don't know, for COVID reporting or for COVID vaccination. The rest will become easy. And you're never alone on that. If, for example, if you start looking at COVID, it's kind of likely that you will not be the first entity in the world to think about FHIR for COVID. Sorry for the sarcasm. It is really a good opportunity to ask others, hey, what are others doing about this? Are they using the vaccination, or are they using the reporting, or are they doing both? And from then there's a huge amount of implementations out there, and you should always see what is happening. First of all, to be able to steal ideas, that's always a good thing. And also, and I don't know if you can see this in our session that we had for FHIR profiling. FHIR allows you to work in layers. So you can say, this is the FHIR layer, which everyone is compliant to, but I want to build a national layer on top of this, which is kind of an additional constraint specification on that. And then you can have a project on that. And doing this once for one project, you can start seeing these things not conceptually, but in reality. You can say, okay, I will have my terminologies. My terminologies, they are not FHIR terminologies, they are my national terminologies. Okay, how am I going to manage that? I know in terms of FHIR, what are the resources for that, but what does it mean in terms of my governance process? Who is going to do this? Is my National Terminology Center, or is it my technical team? Those questions, if you do this once, and again, it's just a recommendation, if you do this once, you'll be much better prepared to have this kind of expertise that you know a bit better how to plan the next one. So the first plan, I would say, be optimistic, or be sure that you will always be optimistic, because not everyone knows all that they need to know. The scope seems clear, it's not clear. There's lots of constraints, but try to do it once and try to get from the different phases. And now I wanted to shift a bit into the question from Mamadou. So try to see, how do you get knowledge in FHIR? So that's the community stuff and the courses. Try to see, how do you take that for your flavors. That is the implementation guide sessions and the building of implementation guides that we will have the session in 2 weeks from now. And the rest of the community can definitely support you there. Many people are doing that, so you'll definitely have lots of people that are having similar issues, or more advanced or not so advanced issues as you'll have. So look at FHIR, look at how to transform FHIR or to adapt FHIR to your flavor. And then the next part, which is the implementation and the governance. So the governance is, who is going to manage my FHIR value sets, who is going to manage my FHIR profiles. That's a governance thing. that should always fit within one project. I can tell you from my experience that I had a couple of projects. That's always the tricky part, because people think that FHIR is just a technical standard. And when this means that, well, from now on, you have to use REST, and that means something in terms of data structures. So you cannot have ready documents. You have bits of information here and there that you have to collect. Well, but what about access control? Who can access that information? This opens a lot of discussions. So it's never just a technical problem. But start with that, and then finally the implementation. For the implementation, oh, by the way, now is the time that you interrupt me, and if I tell me if I'm missing something, if I'm missing the top altogether, or if it's kind of meets what you are expecting. Shamika?
Yeah, it's all good. I think we could move on to implementation.
Okay. We will always
Thank you
go
so
back.
much.
Yeah, thank you. About the implementation. So since FHIR is relatively new, there is, of course, much more experience in discussing how things should be than yet like 5 years. There's no 5 years of experience or 10 years of experience with FHIR. Well, 5 years maybe there's something, but 10 years it's hard to get, because FHIR was born in 2000 and in 2011, I think. It just became a thing, I think, around 2014. So there is some experience, some expertise, but large-scale deployments, they are still not it's not really everywhere in every country. Looking at that, what FHIR has, let me just, if you don't mind, I'm just going to browse a few things as I would if I were searching for that information for me. So FHIR has, so these are the links that we can share with you. FHIR has the Confluence page, so wiki. Let me see if I can hide this. Let's see if this, yeah, shows up. And then if I go into the Confluence, if I see reference implementations, I should be able to get something out there. So there is not only the standardization, the standard that is defined, but there's a big community that is contributing to making sure that, I don't know why the search is not working. Yeah, it is. Reference server. Servers. So you can use the Confluence to find some information, and you have some servers that are available. So you can start with FHIR now, and you don't have to set up your own server. You can use one of the existing servers if you want. Just throw some JSONs at FHIR. That is something that you can do. For example, let me just open one. If you're really new to how this works technically, this is something that is useful, and depends on how technical you are. So let me just indulge myself a bit in that new tab. So you have a couple of servers. You have open source servers, several open source servers. So this one, the first one is started as the reference, and this is the one that has the broadest scope of. So whatever FHIR supports, you normally expect it to be on these servers. There is a couple of other servers depending on your technology stack. The FHIR server is a server that is not open source. It's .NET based. So if you want to do plugins for that, you can. So even the closed source server, it allows you to play a bit with it. The Happy server is an open source server. It's based on Java, so it's very popular for people that want to mess with it. So there's many servers that we have there. In the work that I'm involved, I think all of them are Happy based, because there is a big Java community, and it's also open source, and it's Apache license, which means that you can do it. You can use it, and you can keep, and you're not constrained like in GPL. You can use it for commercial solutions or in open source solutions as well. So you can look at these ones. The other servers is whatever makes you more comfortable in terms of platform. Setting up a server is really, oh, this server is down, of course. Let me see if I can find the Happy server. So I'll just use another one. So this is just the front end to the server, and FHIR is really just a communication standard. Yeah.
You're not sharing your screen if you mean to.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was. Oh, I thought I clicked the button. Yeah, the window for sharing, for telling which screen to share was hidden, and I don't see it. Apologies. So just quickly going back, I just went here and looked for reference servers, and it finds me this page, and this page has a couple of servers that you can use. So these are Graham's test servers. This is the another server that exists. Some of them are open source, some of them are not. This one is C#, not open source. This one is the one I'm talking about. The FHIR reference server is Java based, and it's free license and a very permissive license. So that's a very popular choice. And this is how it looks like out of the box. So as a FHIR server, if you want to play with it, it's really simple. You just go, for example, and I want to do some interactions with the server. Let me just do something on the server. I just created all the medication statements on the server. Oh, let me see if so this is how the server reacts. And FHIR is about, so what FHIR does is to specify the content of these interactions. So how do I do the search? So in this case, I just launch this URL and I get this result. And if I want to get a specific medication statement, for example, I just take this, and then I do this, and then I have, so I'm just interacting with the server in the normal FHIR way. So this is a normal RESTful interaction. The way that I'm doing this, or what can I do here? Can I do searches, etc.? That is the FHIR specification. So that's the thing that you would eventually have your teams gain experience in. Then they will see, okay, what if I don't want a medication statement? What if I want the patient? Okay, then you get the patients. What if I want both of them? Okay, that's part of the FHIR syntax that you can develop and learn, and that's part of your specifications. So once you have the specification, you can use one of the test servers to test it against. So you can try this test server, the happy.fhir.org, to test your specification, or you can deploy your own server. If you join us on the session on the 28th, I presume, you will be not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday afterwards. After that, we will have a session on implementation guides and how to profile FHIR for real. And at the end of that session, I will also explain a few options, at least one option, that you can use that and say, okay, I've started with FHIR, I made my own implementation, and now I want to roll out a server. It's really simple because there's a very active community facilitating those solutions, and it's really, really something that you can do. So once you have that, you have your own server. So for Mamadou, I am now in the preliminary phases of implementation, which is you have a test lab, you have something that you can play with. So if you make your specs, you document them in the right way, and you can have a lab server that you can play with. Okay, what does that do? That allows you to pilot. So, and that going back to the implementation sequence and scoping, if you start by piloting, you are already not in a bad situation. After that, then there's the whole set of things that you have to look at, and those maybe are more advanced topics. And feel free to reach out for any of those or anything that you need in the chat.fhir.org or through the many mailing lists that we have. For example, this is a REST interaction, but I don't want, maybe in my case, I don't want to have a RESTful interaction just saying these are the medication statements, because I don't know this number that I just entered. I want to see all the medication statements for one patient. There is a way to do that in FHIR. We just have to see how it would work, but that's still a simple step. But what if we say, I never want to have the medications and the patient separate. I want to have one single big data object that takes the snapshot of the entire thing and shows me what's the overall set of medications for that patient. Besides that being a kind of a big functional discussion that you have to have with your stakeholders, FHIR does provide mechanisms for you to do just that, to say, I want to specify in my country or in my project that you never get just the medication statement as isolatedly. You actually get the entire information about that patient and all the past medication for that patient, if that's your scope. And then for those of you familiar with these words, we are talking about architecture. Like, do we want to have a message architecture where we say one message, so we have a one-to-one communication, or are we talking more about a document based communication where I have one content provider and then we have a broadcast of that information, and whoever needs to pick it up, they pick it up. So is it a one-to-one or a broadcast line, like of a kind of communication? And if it's a broadcast, how do you ensure that if I go to one doctor and I get one medication, and then I go to the other doctor or to a pharmacy, and the medication that I get dispensed is not really the one that I was prescribed, how do those cross, and how do those sets of information they can be coming together? That's part of the specification work. But this means that you'll have a lot of challenges, not only in the technical specification of FHIR, but in how does this work in your environment. So how do you say, I need this to be in a document format, because the servers or the doctors, they don't want to query for information. They just want a snapshot that is authored by another user. That's one choice. Or you say, I have a smart app and my application can get information from whatever it is. So I just need to have a list of FHIR servers from which I need to query information in my country. So if I'm in a country, if I know that I have to query 5 or 6 national repositories of information until I'm sure that I get all the information, that's it. Or you have to say, in my country, we need to have one central server with all the information about all the patients. If you can do that, you save yourself a lot of problems, but you open a lot of other problems to resolve. So this is the challenges that you can expect to have already in the first phase of implementation, defining the architecture, and with it comes, how do we do authentication, how do we do encryption of information, and those are topics. Each one on its own has lots of details. And I think the best way to do it, start with a pilot, and for that pilot, explore all these things and really reach out to the rest of the community. There is more depth that we can give to this, but Mamadou, I would like to have your feeling of where we stand and how deep is your wound that we have to go deeper in the flesh, or if that gives you already some information to get you already scared about how big this is. Amadou?
Yeah, yes.
Are you okay?
Yeah, yes, please. I'm in the laboratory, but because I'm in the field. So please, can you repeat for me?
No, so I was just, after you have your implementation, let's say design, or after you have your first content specification ready, so after you say, this is what I want to do, let's say I want to start with prescriptions of medications. Okay, that's relatively simple, it seems. In terms of FHIR, you can start with that. The real fun starts when you have to implement this and say, where are my medication prescriptions going to be? Is it in my hospital server, or do I have to put it in a central server? And to have it on a central server, who has the right to change that information? So there's going to be lots of deployment and implementation questions that you will have. Technology at this moment is the least of your problems. The choices that you have to make in terms of architecture and technology, those are the problems. So implementing something on your lab as a proof of concept is really easy nowadays, and we're trying to make it more and more easy, because with that you can go to your stakeholders, and especially not technical stakeholders, and you can say, okay, I have this working in my lab. As you can see, I can exchange prescriptions and I can exchange dispenses if that's the case. So now what? Where is the central server? Who is going to be the master patient index? Where is that going to reside? Who can access that? So there is going to be many discussions. I just mentioned a couple of them from the top of my head, but these are the expectations that you can have, is that once you start hitting the ground, you will see that the architecture and the technology stack that you have to use will give you a lot of challenges on just the deployment and implementation of this. Specification of FHIR at that moment will look simple if you look back.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I will start by going to this site and start setting my labs server and to see how this will be, and I will let you know also. And yeah.
Just trying to make your life hopefully easier. Here's one concrete suggestion. If you can, please join. If you cannot, please watch the video afterwards. Join the session that we'll have in 1.5 weeks from now, the session about FHIR implementation guides, because that will summarize the basics of FHIR and how FHIR profiling works, and you will come out of that with a clear idea of how do I take all of that and make my own server. And it's much easier, I hope, for you to see that in 1 hour or 2 hours than to have to go through this in many hours. So I would invite you to do that. And please, not only this site, we can send a list of relevant sites to the mailing lists that we have, but reach out. There is a ton of central places for information. The one that I really recommend most is the chat.fhir.org, because from there you can ask questions. Hey, I'm a newbie, can I ask questions? And then everyone will say, yes, sure, go ahead.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, I will do that. So, thanks.
Perfect, thank you. Which brings me to Shaminda's question. What is the question that you wanted to ask on the on this?
So sorry, I just want to clarify whether it's pretty basic questions are allowed here. So I'll give a bit of background to what we are doing. So I'm from Sri Lanka, and we are trying to develop national profiles to enable interoperability between the multiple systems we are having. So how we started doing it is actually we wanted to develop sort of a minimum data set that could cater to the primary healthcare in the country, which we managed to do and get consensus with some of the stakeholders, different, specialist colleges, etc. So once we did that, we wanted to use the FHIR profiles to, have this data exchange. What we try to do is, go to the FHIR and see what are the available nationally published FHIR profiles, and see how we can take the maximum of that and to do a bit of customization to, align for local needs as well. So in this journey, one of the few things that we would like to have a bit of clarification is, so we also looked at this happy servers. My major question is like, okay, now we select, Sri Lanka has a something called personal health number, which is a unique health identifier for the country. Now we we allow that to be a personal person identifier, with also allow multiple of them. Now, do we have to do any customizations on like the happy server to accommodate that, or does it is it automatically accommodated? And the other one is like, if you are having multiple institutions connecting to the happy server, we need to have sort of authorization levels. This institution can only access this institution's data, likewise. So how do you actually accommodate things like that? Are there any resources that we can actually refer to get more information on that? Thank you very much.
Okay. I was waiting. I was expecting a newbie question. That's already some work behind it that you have. So the two questions. How do you look at specifications that you have to do for your own country, and how do those enter the happy server, for example? Let me give one example here. So you mentioned something that we did in Belgium quite recently, or well, a couple of years ago, and it's really similar, I think, to what you mentioned, because you mentioned the national number. So here's an example. I have this from the top of my head. I had another one that I was working, but the profile is not ready, so this one is ready. So this is an old version of a national implementation, and This is an implementation guide, and I really encourage you to see the implementation guide session, because this is something that you would hopefully work with every day. But basically you say, okay, I want to take a patient, but it's not the patient. In this case, I want to have my patient, or my own flavor of patient. And there we can add a couple of things, but you can say, in this case, I want the identifier to be supportive of the SSIN, so the Social Security Identification Number, which you can say, in my case, I don't care about this thing called SSIN. I call this the Sri Lankan identification number. You can do that. So there are some techniques in FHIR, and we can go through that in the next session, in the implementation guide session. What you do is to create your own FHIR profiles, as you said. So once you have this, you have the FHIR artifacts. And actually, the thing that I'm going to share with you in 2 weeks is, after if you make an implementation guide like this one, like the thing that we're seeing here on this web page, basically you have this. Let me hope. Sorry for the non-technical guys package TGZ. So on this web server, wherever it resides, there is always one specific file that is a package. Doesn't matter what it is. It contains the full set of specifications. So everything that is that I was showing, all of these things that are in this page, everything here, all the constraints, all the examples, they are in that package. And you can throw this at the server, at the Happy server. That's step one. And you can say, okay, from now on, dear Mr. Happy server, you know what the Sri Lankan patient looks like, which is not a patient, it's a Sri Lankan patient. And that's step one. Step two will be, you can configure your server to say, if someone provides a patient, and if declare it as this is the patient as per the Sri Lanka implementations, you server can accept. Otherwise, server, please reject that information. So you can configure your server to accept only certain types of resources, so resources that meet your constraints, your profiles, and you can tell the server to say, please reject anything else. You can do that, or you can say, if it's a Sri Lanka patient, then store it like this, or do it like this. And if it's a Sri Lanka extended patient or unidentified patient, you do something like that. So there is a thing called interceptor, I think, in the Happy library that you can use to configure the server a bit. So basically what you do is to make sure that your specifications are in this standardized format. You put them on the server. That is, you run a command line and you have it there. And after that, you can still do some tweaks to the server, because Happy is, so most servers, but Happy is very open there, that you can put interceptors there, and interceptors can do things like, if you get the patient, but if that patient does not declare itself to be conformant with the Sri Lanka national patient profile, then the server shall reject that request. That's easy to achieve, so we can do that. Still in this area of plugins and extending the Happy server, that will also answer the question that you had about access control. There you need a bit more of a solid, you need a bit more solid architecture. You need to implement your policy decision points. For example, you have to say, and your policy decision rules. So you need to say, where is my repository, or where is who knows whether hospital 1 can get information and nurse 2 cannot get information, and nurse 3, who is also a doctor, can get information, but only if they are wearing the hat as a doctor, but not the hat as a nurse. Who says that? That will be a repository that you have to set up. That repository, we are working to standardize also it a bit, but you'll have to do things like XACML and custom logic to implement that. At this moment, that's what you'll have. But the good thing is that you can do all that through the Happy interceptors. You can say, for every message that comes in, hold on, I have something to do with it, and you call the other logic that you want to have with it, and you can have it hard-coded, or hopefully in a standardized way in the future. But you can use those kinds of interceptors to shape the knowledge. And there's a couple of variations there, but that's pretty much what you have to do. Is you have to see what comes in. You have to see, according to the rules that I define, is this something that I want to accept? Is this a request that I want to follow through or not? and within the FHIR constraints. So the FHIR constraints say that if you make this request, the answer is 200 OK, and then you get the content. But if this request comes with, I don't know, whatever search parameters here or something else, you can say the server shall reject that request and present a 404 error. That's something that you can configure your server. So that's a technical implementation it's an implementation on a technical layer that if you use an open tool like Happy, you should be able to get this. And here, just to shut up for now, the thing that you have to do is to look at current implementations. You'll find a few, and always join the dev days and the connectathons. Those are the places where you'll speak with people that are having the same problem or similar problems, and go to chat.fhir.org to see who is having that problems. And you will always see, yeah, we implemented our privacy layer or our data access control layer in this way or in that way. You will see lots of people that have gone through this or are going through this. So try to tag along to these things. And now I shut up while I see what is the rest on the chat. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for the great explanation. I'll definitely look at those resources. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And just one thing that is kind of implicit, sorry, I should have mentioned this from the beginning. Everything that FHIR is doing is favoring open source and open sharing of knowledge. If you do an implementation guide, you can do it on your own, or you can also put it on a public repository. And if you do that, then, for example, if you say, hey, my thing is not working well, or I don't know how to do this, then it's a public thing. So you can ask people like myself, people like many others, say, hey, can anyone please take a look at that? I don't see why this is failing, or how can I put that patient inside that medication, or vice versa. By making your specifications open and public, like we try to do with most of them, then you will not only be contributing to the pool of knowledge, you will also be able to gather knowledge if you have some questions, or if sometimes it happens, some people, if you ask a question, how can I associate the medication with the patient? And then someone might say, well, I use an extension. And then I would say, for example, no. You would use this as a prescription or as a medication administration. So there will be some challenges, but that's a good thing about being open, is that if you're willing to do that, then you gain a lot of knowledge just by exposing things and getting good advice. So hopefully all good advice from a worldwide community. This, for me, this has been a massive time saver. Just keeping things open and asking everyone, hey guys, how does it work? Does it work okay? Do we need to change it? Does anyone have any recommendations? And that's it. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are also promoting open, source and open, data, etc. So I think that's a good way, so that we can also contribute and benefit from that as well. Thank you.
In most cases, you will see, how can I do this? And someone will say, well, I had a similar problem. This is how I solved it. And then they will point to a GitHub repository somewhere, and then you'll see what's happening. Or how did you do this? Well, here's an example of how you can make, for example, your national patient ID number. It's much easier. Instead of sitting down for half an hour and explaining how slicing works, say, no, here's how it is. Here's one example. Just copy paste that and adapt what you need to do. And in some cases, it just works like that. You will learn things, but when you need to apply, you just see, oh, I see the theory behind it. Let me see this in practice. You just look at one existing repository, and you have the solution. You can build your own solution based on what others are doing. It really becomes easy and easy once you have this this first pilot that shows you how big this is. You start getting more and more proficient. Now, just Jonathan, just approaching a bit the detailed topic of how do you do designations. So just completely changing gears now. This is very dear to me. And maybe that's one recommendation I would also leave, and I will try to emphasize this in the next session. whenever you do an implementation,
Yeah. Oh,
chances, yep.
thanks, Jose. I was just going to suggest that it definitely no need to tackle this today in a few minutes. We could, I'd be happy to do this on a future discussion
Right.
if we want to keep fielding questions.
Yeah, but I would like just to tease a bit the topic, because it's also important for the others, because there's one thing that's behind, I think, what you said, and I think it's very important for the others as well. So I will not open the big can of worms now, but just let me open it a bit to have a sense of the scent. Here's the thing, and this is one thing that has been a concern from me and others for quite some time. If you have a project for prescriptions, and if tomorrow you have a project for lab, most likely some of your information is going to be overlapping. So you need patient models on both sides. You need to do things for labs and for medications. And then you need to do the same thing for discharge summaries. You need to do, there will be lots of overlaps. If you start only with the technical specifications, so that goes a bit into the governance thing. If you start with the technical specifications alone, very likely, or most surely, you will end up with one working group saying, or one team saying, yeah, this is not how we model the patient. And the other one says, yeah, but this is how we do it. So we have a problem. And then by the time you know it, you have 20 patient profiles on the same country. And the problem is that they will not be compatible. So one of the things that I like to always propose is, and this is the teaser, or this is the connection point. Whenever you do specifications, don't look only at the technical way of doing this, just the FHIR profiles, but try to keep what we sometimes call a data dictionary of data. So try to keep an inventory of what data elements are we using here. And I'm using, let's say, for example, I'm using the patient object. The patient object, regardless of its FHIR or not FHIR, the patient object always has a national number. This is something that you can say. You can ask the functional experts, do we allow one national number or two national numbers per person? Do we allow the national person to change the person to change their national number? These are questions that live not on the technical side, but on the functional side. And my strong recommendation is try to capture those, and there's a way to do that in FHIR. Try to capture those as much as possible as a data dictionary. Because, for example, the national identification number in my country, in Belgium, if you change gender, you must get a new national identification number, because the national numbers, they have a prefix or a suffix that's depending on the gender. So if you get a sex change, then you have to do they have to change the national number. So, and this is something that technical people will not decide. It has to be the functional people. And if you overwhelm clinical people and functional people with technical details, then they are lost. So it's always a good thing to say, keep an inventory of what your data is and what it means. For example, the patient sex is the administrative sex and can only have these values. The patient gender identity is something else, and that we can allow there a multitude of values. These things, try to capture them, and there's a way. As I said, I will give an example of that next time in 2 weeks from now. But try to keep some sort of track of what information elements you are using throughout your specifications, because this is going to hurt you if you don't. So if you start letting your information say, well, for the medication guys, the product means something, and for the lab guys, the product means something else. At some moment, you want to reconcile that information and you cannot. And more seriously, at some moment, you want to deploy and it doesn't work because you don't have the patient in the right format, or the information is not in the right things. And some people are using point-to-point communication with all that comes with it. Some people are doing bigger structures of information in a broadcast way, and that's quite incompatible if you're not careful. So try to keep always a functional view of what your data means. And yes, there will be some technical challenges on how to do that in FHIR. I am feeling currently that pain because I'm trying to capture a couple of data dictionaries, and I cannot do it on a conceptual level in a sensible way. But yeah, that might be indeed a topic for another session that we can follow up on. But this would be I just wanted to say this: if you let things become only technical, it's going to hurt soon. And hopefully it's going to hurt on you, sorry for this, and not your stakeholders, because your stakeholders will have no idea what you're doing. So if you are a FHIR expert, my recommendation is try to iterate as much as possible, try to provide information that people can read, try to come up with lots of examples to say, okay, this is the patient and this is the anonymized patient. This is how it looks like in a JSON file or something. The more you can interact between the technical level and the functional level, the safer you are against, future proofing your specification. Otherwise, by the first time you switch the button and say we are going live, the reality will kick in and say no, you're not, because you forgot that authentication has to be based on the patient ID, and the patient ID is handled differently between the lab and the medication, and that will break the whole thing. So something like this. I'm just making up one possible example, but this is a recommendation. Try to keep sense of what data do you have throughout your entire portfolio, not just for one specification, but the other thing. And yeah, eventually you will need some governance processes. You'll need to see who manages this big dictionary of data. But that's maybe a topic for another discussion.
Jose, I have a small, I have two questions. Maybe those are like two different scopes. One is implementation and one is a technical one. Implementation wise, how's your experience with the health insurance integration with the FHIR standards? Because I mean, as we all know, I mean, health insurance domain is one of the most health information rich databases. So in Sri Lankan setup, the problem is like it's never interlinked for anywhere. Those are like just isolated ones. So how's your experience on that, and how you tackled it? And the technical question is because there were like HL7 version 2 systems and those compliant. How did you approach like mapping to HL7 file, and what's the scope of mapping them again in the future scope when they release it, whenever they release a new version?
Yeah, indeed. So let me take the second question first, because it's most essential. I had the same problem in several places. Sometimes it was version 2 to FHIR migration, or CDA to FHIR migration, or another standard to FHIR migration. And you'll have this when FHIR makes a new version. You might still need to migrate between FHIR version 4 and the next version. So this is something that you'll have. For this is one of the advantages of you defining your information in a more abstract way. So if you say this is my information, regardless of how it maps to the FHIR resources, if you have that discussion first, and if you document that, next time a new version comes, you don't have to rediscuss the whole thing again. You just start from the data dictionary and say, how does the same data dictionary map now to the FHIR resources in the new version, or to the new standard? Or if you have a previous data dictionary, how can you take that and map it to FHIR? You don't do it V2 to FHIR. You do this, my advice is you try to make a data dictionary of that, validate that with your clinical stakeholders, and then map that to FHIR, because then your data is much better managed. So that's one important recommendation that I would do. You can do one-to-one. There are some resources, ask around in the chat.fhir.org. There are some resources that help you do the mapping. But as you do that, try to say, oh, I'm mapping the patient.id. Okay, let me take note that I have a thing called patient.id. That's my data dictionary. Keep track of that, because in the future you will need that. The other question was the
health insurance.
The health insurance. Oh, let me say first, I have a very good experience with that, because I don't care. I live in a socialist country, as some people in America can say. I just joke with this. I live in Belgium. I mean, most of Europe. The key drivers are the governments, or have been the governments until this moment. And as you say, the insurance, they have a more closed system. So I don't have an experience with the insurance itself, but I do know that it's a bit more tight control. They will have lots of rules about accessing the data, which data can they have, or which data do they want to share, etc. If you talk about a US insurance scheme where people have to have a pre-approval thing before they get treated, it's just another FHIR message or another FHIR exchange. You can say, hey, I want to treat this patient. Is this patient covered for that? Yes or no? So there's a working group in FHIR called Financial Management Group. They're handling all sorts of questions around this insurance and pre-approval, etc. So people like me, we start more in the clinical world, because that's that's the main driver, which is patient gets treated. Who cares who's going to pay for that? That's a secondary concern. But in other countries, that's not how it works. And even in these countries, like for example in Switzerland, you have, in Germany and in Belgium, and in Belgium you can have a small hospitalization insurance, but in many places you do have private insurance systems, and they will not be before the treatment. They might be after the treatment. But still, there will be some information about billing. Most of those considerations, they are in the FHIR Financial Management Working Group. So there's a group devoted to those things. This is to say, I don't have a lot of experience with that. I just know the resources. There's things like contract. There's things like charge items. Those things, they are foreseen in FHIR, and you would be most welcome to propose some challenges to that group and see who reacts to that. So if you say, oh, I have this challenge, who has been going through this? I'm pretty sure there'll be lots of companies in the US that have been addressing this. In Europe, there will be some people looking at this, but from a different perspective. So we look more at diagnostic related reimbursement and not as much the pre-approval and paper service, but we have other types of concerns.
Yeah, I think for France, I think they have already 100% linked the health insurance system for their national insurance. So everything's
yeah, indeed. So indeed,
going hand in hand.
Everyone will have their own type of insurance. People like me that are focused more on the as I said, patient goes into hospital, they get treated. That's the thing. If someone has to pay, or if it's the government or whatever, this is it's one political reality here. That sometimes it's the foremost concern, sometimes it's not a concern at all. But all those things, they fall under the financial management. So if you need to have a transaction to say, can I do this treatment? Is there an approval needed, or we just provide the charge items after the procedure is done? All those things related to billing, they are in the financial management, but that opens a big discussion, and I'm just wrapping up this topic from my side, which is, if you do that, you have to have, for example, your list of allowed service, like list of procedures that you can perform for this kind of patients or for that kind of conditions, or the list of medications that this insurance plan covers versus the ones that it doesn't cover. So these kind of things, you will need a lot of data repositories to see who is covered against what. Those discussions, they will start with charge items and with formulary approvals, etc. But it's a big topic. It's not something that I can say, well, from my very limited experience, I know exactly how it works. Now, the best thing is ping us on chat.fhir.org. You will most likely find some people that have had the same challenge or are having the same challenge, or they have already implemented it.
Okay, thank you so much, Jose.
Thank you.
And I would like to propose, like maybe in future sessions, probably you can do like a domain-specific discussion, such as maybe pharmacy modules or maybe laboratory modules with use cases, and just a suggestion probably for the. Thank you so much, Jose.
Thank you for the decision. I think it's a good idea that once we have kind of the basics covered in our sessions, we should say, okay, let's look at the big topic of medications or the big topic
exactly.
of insurance. And we cannot explore the whole truth there, but we can use those as kind of small pilots, like how would we do if we wanted to make an implementation guide on medication dispense or medication prescription. Well, this is it, and it's not to solve the problems, but it's just to see what kind of problems will arise once you start entering, for example, medication. You'll need a medication formulary. You'll need maybe approval depending on the country that you are in. You need traceabilities. Maybe you want to have supply chain. We cannot solve those problems in 1 hour or in a few hours, but at least I think we can raise awareness to some of them. So that's a good suggestion. Thank you. Vranda, I know that we are well over time.
We are. So I was just going to say thank you, everyone. Great questions, and we look forward to seeing you at the next FHIR webinar on July 28th. I've dropped the link in the chat a few times, and you can find the links on our website. So you just go to digitalsquare.org, you'll be able to find it. And Jose, thank you for the excellent facilitation and answers.
Thank you very much.
It was lovely.
really fun. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you
See you
very much.
soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.